Welcome to Supply Circles, stories from the innovators, disruptors and improvers in supply chain management today. Brought to you by AI Group.
Yes, indeed. Hello, I'm James Scotland, coming to you today from the Yunganbar language region, and this is the Business Improvement Podcast that asks the question, how can we in Australia create supply chains that are resilient and sustainable at a time when we're implementing the 3Ds, digitalisation, decarbonisation, and the diversification of our risk profile, especially in our extended supply chains. Each fortnight, I delve into different sections of the end-to-end supply chain. I chat with fascinating and interesting people, and we try to have some fun along the way. Now, as I've said many times before, up until the 1970s or so, businesses did everything they could in-house. As much as possible, businesses handled all aspects of production and distribution within the businesses. Business had engineers, mechanics, fitters and turners, design people, time and motion experts, procurement people, big warehouses holding everything conceivable, fleet managers, human travel arrangers, sales planners, and so much more. Over time, everything not regarded as the core functions, though, was outsourced. And what were the general managers who used to manage the old in-house system became chief operating officers or supply chain managers or business improvement managers, looking to gain maximum effectiveness from the complex and dynamic labyrinth of relationships called business today. This podcast addresses the question, how do we make all of this work in a way that makes our business sustainable and resilient despite the constant disruptions and changes? And how do we do it at a time when our economy and our lives are becoming more and more digitalised? Well, I said that we do this by asking fascinating and interesting people. And today, my guest is a person who was once upon a time the youngest and the brightest of the best. He's now no longer young, but he's still my mate. Hello, Andy. My guest is Andy Brightmore.
Hello, James. Thank you. I can confirm I'm no longer young. I'm not sure I was ever bright or the best either, but thank you. What a great introduction.
You know what you do is just fake it until you make it, or just keep faking it, I think is the story.
I'll keep you posted on how it's going.
Over the last few years, I'm not sure how many years you'll tell us, you were a senior manager, in charge of business improvement and for a large organisation. You've now left. What are you doing now?
I'm in that beautiful space between finishing up a job, which I have genuinely loved and has been an absolute highlight of my career, both personally and professionally, over the last 8 years. I'm taking a little bit of time. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity just to sit back and say, okay, what next? So lots of conversations with lots of people. My background is multicultural, multi-industry. And therefore I've been, again, blessed through my life to be able to walk the floors of many different types of businesses and not be constrained by one sector. And now this is the opportunity to say, okay, what new, exciting, cool thing in same or different sector do I want to do next? So little period of reflection, take a breath, reset, and then straight back into it again.
Because I think you worked for an international consultancy, didn't you, for a while, and then you end up working in the sort of, if you like, the front lines of supply chain and procurement and business management. Will you go back to consultancy, or are you looking for frontline?
It's a good question. I mean, my history has been a bit unusual. Military to automobile manufacturing, to heavy duty manufacturing, to Big Four consulting, as you mentioned there, across, I think, 20 countries I worked in. And it was that organization that brought me to Australia. And then in food service. Pretty untraditional route. I'm one of those guys, whether it's geographies or industries, there's a part of me that says you can't go back. And actually the fun is in going and doing something completely different. It's that learning part that keeps it fresh. I don't think I'm going to go back into consulting. But right now it's a clean piece of paper, open book, whatever the right metaphor is, to decide what do I do, what do I want to learn, what do I want to contribute to next.
Yeah, when I was a young manager, so I was in a management role, we went and did some training and they said the employees of the future will have multiple different careers. They'll operate in different industries and they won't just get a job for life. And then I proceeded to have 5, 6 different, completely different industries that I worked in within totally different functions. And I reflected thinking, oh, they said it'd be in the future, but I just did that. Remember the days when your mum and dad used to say, just get a job and, stay there forever. Do you think you're better off for having been that sort of wandering executive?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Absolutely. The greatest gift of my childhood, having grown up with my parents in the military, was getting used to being in different countries and moving around all the time. And I carried that through the early part of my working career. It personally, professionally, as a leader, to work in different cultures, to work with different people, to work in different environments, to see how things are made, products, to understand how services are created and brands are created. It's been an amazing journey so far. I think I'm far more rounded as an individual than I would have been if I'd stayed in the military. Not to say that wouldn't have been great fun, but I would have been a very different person, I think. And I wouldn't have met so many just the amazing characters and people that have molded me, worked alongside me, worked for me along the way. And like I said, I look back now as I sit back and reflect on the last 8 years. It's just been absolutely fantastic. So I think for me, it was a blessing. Everything I see, read, hear about this generation now entering the workforce is that it's an assumption that they will move quickly, far more agile than we ever will be. The days of, as you say, mum and dad saying you need a job for life, you need security. People have a different definition of what security is now and what they want from their career. So I think global mobility, global careers, and the ability to pivot quickly are just going to be default expectations versus certainly when I started, it felt very unique.
There's a few things I want to talk to you about that, but the idea about the new generation, I was speaking at a function yesterday morning, a breakfast function, and in the Q&A, someone said, "What do you think life will be like in 2030, in 6 years' time?" And I said, "Well, the first thing to remember is that the people born in this century will be middle managers. So they'll be 30. They'll be graduated in 6, 7, 8 years of experience, and people born in this century. Now, for those of us that were born in the previous century, that's just a mind-boggling thing. I mean, I remember the year 2000, Y2K and all that, and everyone's going, "What?" It's going to be different. And I think that broad knowledge that you've had and I've been able to have will set us up in trying to help the young kids coming through as well. Let's put it in context. What have you been doing for the last 8 years?
So the last 8 years, I've been working in the food industry, contract outsourcing food industry for the largest company in that sector in the world within Australia. London listed, Australia, one of 40 companies. I've been very privileged to be on the executive leadership team of the Australian business, both looking after the procurement and supply chain for all of the food and other products and services that business needs to do what it does, but also standing up with some excellent colleagues, a division which was purely about procurement of food into other organizations across sectors as well. So food industry is not something 10 years ago or 12 years ago, if you'd have said, is this an industry you gravitate towards? I knew nothing about it. I feel I know enough to be dangerous now. And certainly over the last number of years, the challenges of moving food from farm to plate in whatever environment, just in Australia, has been just a massive learning curve, supremely interesting. I wish I kept notes. The book would be amazing. A very, very complex business, but like all complex businesses, at its heart has just been amazing people working very hard, doing very clever things to keep the business going and keep the service delivered.
What have you learnt? I'll put that into context because you say there's so much that you've learnt. You're going to write a book about it, but you're dealing with a number of different issues, including that was COVID during that period, changing workplace, as we said, changing marketplace, so different food tastes, and you're there at the top trying to figure out how to bring it all together. What's it like there, and what have you learnt about yourself and about business and life, I guess?
Oh, great question. I don't know where to start with that. I've learned so much, and I've probably forgotten more than I should have along the way. Like you said, the last number of years in Australia has been characterized by more supply chain disruptions than
it's been fun.
It has, yeah, and back to back, bushfires to pandemics to road and rail infrastructures. I think I've learnt about Australia, about how fragile the infrastructure is, certainly in moving things from the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa. I think I've learnt how dependent and valuable different modes of transport are in this country. The freight moves by rail, but the amount of freight that moves by road and how changes in that infrastructure can be so disruptive so quickly, especially in a geography as large as Australia. I think I've learnt, and I learned it a number of years ago, but the last number of years that I think has really enforced it is there is endless resilience in people. The character, the quality of people to walk into a crisis and solve, as long as they're in the right culture, the right environment that empowers and supports them to do that, especially when you think it wasn't that long ago when we were all solving these problems from separate, bedroom offices and Teams meetings, and we weren't even in the same room together, which, that in itself, what a massive disruption. The resilience of people, the quality of people, I think has just been absolutely outstanding. And then I think from a business perspective, however sexy the business gets, however much you talk about changes in technology and advances and investments and all that good stuff, the basics, the foundations, the fundamentals matter. When the world turns on you, when you need to pivot, it's the basics that keep you moving. And I think a lot of times, certainly my consulting days, what we found were the basics of good, solid, repeatable, consistent process supported by great technology or just good enough technology, but excellent people and great knowledge around it. Sometimes that can get lost or assumed too quickly. When that crisis hits, the basics matter.
Yeah, in a recent podcast, two or three podcasts ago, we talked to the CEO of Blundstone Boots or Blundstone Australia, and they now have a global supply chain and a global market and a massive business. And I asked him what he learned from COVID, and he said, get your basics right, stick to your basics. Go back to how you add value and figure out how to do that very well. And for him, part of that was making sure that he maintained his suppliers around the world so that when things got better, they got better very fast. It's a good message, and also cash flow. Get your basics right, all that kind of stuff. You mentioned the fragile infrastructure in Australia, and particularly in terms of logistics. How do you? There's plenty of people listening to this that say, "Yeah, that's our problem. We just keep having, freight and delivery interruptions." What have you taken away? Give us some of Andy's insights as to how you manage those situations, apart from the fact that you've got to have good, resilient, smart people working for you.
Look, I think when it comes to I'm a supply chain guy at heart, and at the start of my career, and I was always taught relationships matter. And good business process and all that great stuff. But relationships really matter, whether it's colleagues, clients, but especially with suppliers. What we found through COVID or through any of the other infrastructure or supply disruption challenges, and there's still more to come. The World Economic Cycle is turning on us again. There's a major election in a country overseas coming that will have implications for global trade. So there's more disruptions coming, but good, positive relationships inside the business, but especially with those that support your business, are absolutely key. There's always problems. There's always great people who can solve them. People want to solve problems for people they like to do business with, to spend time with, to have conversations with. And I think in a lot of the process and technology part of our life and our businesses, especially with, again, coming to the generation in front of us, which is, more social media, more internet, more web enabled, more, stepping into AI. I think the challenge of really deep, trustful, honest relationships is going to be something that's going to be interesting to navigate. In all the cases, the relationships we have with our suppliers, built on trust, built on honesty, reciprocal in nature, have got us through a lot of the challenges we have. And when you come out the other side of it and business conditions somewhat return to normal, you want to be in an environment where the supplier feels that they can come to you and say, hey, we need your help now. And you're supporting each other's business, you're growing together, you're sharing the challenges together. Because ultimately Australia, large landmass, small population, it's a small supply base. And therefore the relationships become doubly important, I think.
Yeah, we've talked about it many times on this podcast that buyers often say to me, we want suppliers that are like us, our DNA, that understand the way we operate and they operate the same, because when it gets tough, we need to be working on the same page, to use the cliche, sort of like a marriage. You just have to be the fundamentals right if you're going to get through the tough times. Yeah,
I think so. And negotiation is a skill set. I think a lot of times when we talk about procurement supply chain folks, doesn't matter whether you are the procurement person and therefore negotiation is a core part of your role, or whether you're a supply chain distribution logistics person, you are still negotiating, you are still talking to suppliers to get what you need to get through your day, week, year, whatever it may be. That negotiation is a human skill. I still think it's a very underinvested, undertrained, under-recognized skill set in its own right. It's not an app. You can transact through an app. You can do tactical things through an app. But when you need to build those relationships, that's a human skill. And I think after 8 years in this role I've just finished, watching, observing, supporting a lot of people to keep those relationships internally together, especially through COVID, and keep the team, the culture, the business connectivity together, and then all the external relationships from client through to supplier. I think that's been fascinating, and I've learned a lot personally from it. And I think it's really tested our organization, tested our culture, tested that resilience, and seen some amazing people grow through that period as well.
Are you saying you think it will get easier with the new generation, or it's going to be harder, and the new technology as well, combining new generation and new technology? Is that going to be easier or harder?
I don't know if it's easier or harder. I think that's all relative, right? And I'm sure if you asked the generation before me and the generation before me, I remember many, many years ago, around the Brightmore Christmas table, my father arguing about how the internet was going to destroy the world, and it was going to be this awful thing because society can't function. The internet's too disruptive. And then my grandfather reminded him, he said the same thing about television, and my great grandfather reminded me, he said the same thing about radio.
That's good. No.
So it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different.
No. Yeah.
But I think what is going to be very interesting is the pace of change is a lot faster. If you look at the time period between the radio generation, the TV generation, the internet generation, and then you look at internet to smartphones, and then to true smartphones, and now to AI, that the period of time for people within a generation to adapt and absorb and to build this into their work and their personal lives is far shorter. So you got to move faster. And I think the generations certainly behind me and coming in, the challenge that they have is how to absorb and adapt and apply a lot quicker than we certainly had time to grow and learn and apply. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think businesses will continue to change. The basics will stay the same. Technology will become a bigger part. AI is going to become a part in very meaningful ways. I don't think it'll be good or bad. It's just going to be different.
Yeah, I like that answer. I love that answer a lot because culture has always been this question of how do we get a good culture? How do we get the right environment for our work? And there's no right or wrong answer, and there's no right or right generation. I always laugh, by the way, just off the side. I always laugh when I hear my friends saying, "Oh, you know, the new generation, the kids of today, they're going to destroy the world." And I say, no, I'm pretty sure my generation was doing that. I thought we did that. You know, it was the late 70s, early 80s. I'm sure I destroyed the world. I remember my mum telling me very clearly that, you know, it's all going to go wrong. And then one day you don't have long hair and you've got a suit on and you're back to being normal and complaining about the new kids.
Yeah, it's the beautiful dichotomy of change, right? Change is constant. We will rail against it and we'll embrace it depending on how it personally impacts us, but it's a constant. And I think it's just how quickly the wheels of change turn. So I think the generations ahead of us actually have a tougher challenge than we did in finding their place, determining what type of career, rhythm, environments they want to be in. And an environment, certainly economically, I think is going to be very different from when we were starting out. But yeah, it's going to be, you said 2030. I mean, 2030 is 2 minutes away, right? You think about 2050, 2060. Think about the different population, the composition of population that Australia is going to need. The 2050 decarbonization targets, they're far ahead in yours and my future. They'll be immediate for people. At that time, and the regulation and everything come around it will be far tighter. It's going to be very interesting just to see how that whole culture, technology, industry dynamic has to change, because there's some very big flags in the ground, some very big milestones, especially on the carbon side, that people are now just joining the workforce and having to work out.
But they will do what people do. They will just solve the problem. I've no doubt. We will solve it. The annoying thing is we're making the problem harder for them, but they'll still solve it no matter what. You mentioned before that you found that Australians in particular had endless resilience. What's resilience and why have they got it? I mean, what do you admire about that? Seeing as we're getting so deep and philosophical, by the way, Andy. It feels like we're having a coffee. For people listening in, I'm in Surfers Paradise and you're in Sydney, I think. But we're just having one of our coffee chats.
I don't know. I could be a little flippant or cliched, but it's something I believe in. That the Australian, I'm a English guy for the first part of my life, and then many countries afterwards. But most of the countries I've lived in, you've woken up in the dark, come home from work in the dark, and you've had very distinct seasons, of wet and horrible weather. And then hopefully, if you're English, you get 2 days of great summertime. The Australian, get up in the light, come home when it's light, the sunshine, the long summers. I think it contributes significantly to a very positive mindset. It's a country that I think is modern day Australia, very young, clearly, great, deep history behind it. But it feels like a country that's innovating itself and growing and deciding what it wants to be, versus other countries where I've been, where they've steeped in hundreds and hundreds of years of, modern culture history, and it's very hard. It's very ingrained in them to imagine being something they're not. I just think that Australian can-do spirit, that willingness to try different things, is very unique. The people here are multicultural. They come from many many countries. Modern day Australia is founded on lots of diversity. It's a great family environment. There's just so many aspects to Australia as a country. Me and my family are very, very blessed to be here. We've been here now since 2010. I think it just contributes to a mindset that's very unique and very powerful.
It's an interesting insight. You and I both know that if you go into a well-established business and there's legacy systems, it's very hard to turn the ship around, to get it going into a new direction. And what I'm hearing from you is that Australia has those lack of legacy systems compared to other countries. You can't change it because you're stuck in the legacy concepts of centuries and centuries. But we're a bit more fresh and new. Interesting insight. I like it.
Well, it's very interesting when you think about the modern business landscape of Australia. Most organisations are still somewhat an SME in its mindset. Might not be in terms of its number of people, but I think you've still got the 4 richest banks in the world in the same 25 million person population, as a huge amount of SMEs, local startups, great indigenous businesses. It's just an amazing tapestry that I think still feels young and exciting, energetic. To your point, a city with global brands that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's how they do things, and it feels all very pre-programmed and planned. That there's a great excitement, I think, about Australia as an economy, as a country, as a business community, because it still has so much room to grow and develop. And I think that's pretty unique and very cool to be part of.
I think that's fantastic. Good on you. We better go to a break and come back in a sec. Before we go to the break, just out of interest, where were you year 2000, the Y2K? Did you have to manage that issue at all?
Yeah, I was working. The business I worked for, we just acquired a small family business in a place called Gummersbach in Germany, which is an absolutely beautiful place.
They really do have the best names in Germany. Gummersbach, right?
Gummersbach, yes. A beautiful place. I spent about 6 or 7 months there helping to close and then do the post-close synergy planning for the business we'd acquired there. And our biggest concern at the time was when Y2K happens and all the airports stop and none of the planes can get off the ground. How the hell are we going to get back out of Germany?
Yeah. Well, my wife and I were going to go to New York to see the ball drop on the year 2000, and then we decided not to go because of all the dramas of Y2K and the monetary system was going to close down and the planes were going to crash, and then nothing happened. Nothing.
Yeah. A lot of people made a lot of money in consulting and advice and guidance and systems for something that thankfully turned out to be a change in a clock overnight. Yeah,
maybe you and I could figure something out, make some money somehow, create a crisis. We'll play an ad while we think about our next world crisis that we're going to create.
Okay.
The largest Australian workplace changes in over a decade
Underpaying workers could result in crippling fines.
There'll be new rules about when a casual employee has the right
employees will have the right
to disconnect.
Workplace laws are changing. Pay attention or pay the price. Safeguard your business with Australian Industry Group. The legal experts at Australian Industry Group will help you navigate the new legislation and prepare your business for the changes. Become a member today at aigroup.com.au.
By the way, Andy, this is not the first time you've been on the show. You were here once before in your last capacity, and it was a wonderful insight. So if anyone wants to listen to what you used to do back when you had a job, we'll put it in the show notes. It's a good chat we had. Let's go to what you were saying before about you've worked in making things, in creating things, but you've also created brands. What have you learned about creating a brand? Because you went about doing that, didn't you? You started a whole new business. Tell me about brand creation today.
Oh, good question. I think it's interesting in that, I didn't create any brands as such. We had an idea of what we wanted to do. We had an idea of who we thought it should appeal to, who's the customer base. We were building a a style of business that wasn't in Australia. So we knew we had to make a market to sell into it, which was excitingly terrifying at the time. And we needed a presence. So we were bringing an established brand from a part of the greater organization that was in one or two other countries into Australia. And we were designing it from a blank piece of paper. So whilst we could take the high level branding imagery and what the business was from overseas, we had to turn it into something that we could communicate to the Australian customer and explain to them, build a web presence, build a bunch of solutions that could very easily communicate what it is and why they should be interested in knowing more. And then building social media presences around that as well for different communities. And we also wanted at the time to purposely celebrate people in the industry. We wanted it to be very inclusive in not just being a B2B business, but say, hey, we're here to help chefs, hospitality professionals, to deliver great service to their customers. Let's celebrate those folks. Let's celebrate what they do. Let's celebrate the supply chain. Let's bring the face of the farmer and his family that has worked that part of Australia that, is in the middle of nowhere that most people couldn't even find on the map. Let's celebrate that they've been there for so many years, so many generations, and bring them to life and give them a voice and make people proud of the history, the heritage, the product, the process that gets to an end customer. So we started out kind of saying, okay, how do we reach these folks? And it's not just about, let's dream up some clever logos and some buzzwords, but what appeals to them, what's meaningful. And if we stood in a room and we were presenting this, would we feel proud of what it looks like, what it says, and how we can convey it? And can every single person in the team, no matter if you're the old guy in the room, me, to the person that joined yesterday, can you feel comfortable in delivering that consistently? And if we can do that inside our own four walls, when we were a division of a much larger organization in Australia, if we could talk to everybody else in our own organization and they understood and they went, yeah, actually, we see the value in that. That's great. Then we earn the right to go outside of our business to clients of our own. So we had that blessing of an internal proving ground, if you like. But some very creative folks in the team came up with the designs. A wonderful lady built our website and all the content and tuned it. We played it through all the teams to say, okay, does this speak to you? Because our team is a smorgasbord of different people of different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, different experiences. So that when we actually stood this up externally and said, here's our Facebook profile, here's our LinkedIn profile, here's our Instagram profile. Somebody even had to teach me how to use Instagram. That's a tough job nobody wants. That it looked and felt like something we were proud of. And then once it was out there, it was continually refining, building content. I know folks right now who are in the YouTube space, they're in the streaming space, that are just absolute content creators, content discoverers. How do I take something and create a TikTok video or a YouTube video that people are going to attach themselves to? So we spoke to some, and I spoke to some marketing guys to say, okay, what would you guide us? How would you advise? And they said, you never stop looking for content. So, and that was great for us, because what we could do is we could go and interview the chef, interview the housekeeper at the hotel, interview the farmer, just talk to them about why, who are you, how did you get here, what do you love about what you're doing? The same thing that you do through these podcasts, James, and just tell those stories, constant content in the food space. And the amount of people that came to us and said, oh, it's fantastic. You're not talking about yourself. You're talking about people in the industry. That's really interesting. Now tell me about you. So it was a great, probably one of the biggest learning curves I've been on. I'm not a marketing guy, but that power in simple, effective, repeatable, consistent, passionate, proud language, branding, storytelling, content, I'm very proud of the work the team had done over the last 8 years to essentially tell other people's stories as part of telling our own.
Listeners are starting to get to know you. I think I know you pretty well. And I've always been struck by the fact that you love the stories. You love the stories of Australia, you love the story of countries, of the world, of cultures, of the resilience of people, all the stuff we've talked about. But you rarely tell the story of yourself. And I can see that came through in what you were talking about. You know, this idea of build a brand around a story of the people in it. It's probably an interesting insight into the best way to start the branding journey.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, and all through my career, I've had the opportunity to work with exceptional people. People have put their arm around me and looked after me and taken an interest in my career, which I'm eternally thankful for. Great people have supported me along the way. Even better people have told me where I'm wrong and course corrected me along the way. And I just think I enjoy businesses that are powered by people because they're interesting. They're just endlessly interesting. The stories they have to tell and how you convert that energy into people who are so passionate about delivering great service to customers, and therefore will look back at the business and say, okay, we've got to change this, we've got to improve this, we've got to develop this, we should invest in this because it's meaningful to the customer. I did a piece for a friend of mine talking to his leadership team a couple of weeks back, and they were talking about the wanting to invest in technology. And we came to this conclusion, said, look, unless the customer feels the value, why would they pay for it? In which case, if they're not willing to pay for it, why would you? And I think whilst that's easily applied to technology, why would you buy the $1 million box of technology tricks if the customer doesn't see any material improvement in the service you get or in the product you get? I think it comes back to the people. If you can nurture a culture of great people whose stories all have value, and you can tell those stories and share that value, the connectivity, that relationship building inside the business, yes, with the customer, just if not more important with the suppliers, being able to tell and share stories. I think it's a core point, not to sound too cheesy. It's a core point of who we are as people, as humans. And I think coming back to your question around resilience and all that great stuff, culture doesn't happen without great people wanting to come together and share and communicate. Culture is the outcome, I think. And I just find that fascinating. And I've been blessed to work with hundreds and hundreds of amazing people who have inspired me along the way and have influenced me in probably more ways than I realized to who I am and how I try to operate today.
I was going to ask you a question about digital. I might come back to digital, but let's stay with this people and stories and connecting through stories, connecting through understanding people. You said you've worked in 25 different countries, and I think that's right, and that you like working in different cultures, understanding it. For the people listening who are building their supply chains and they're heading overseas and they're going to have to deal with a whole bunch of new things, new approaches, give us some insights in how you travel the world as a buyer or supplier. How do I understand what's happening?
Good question. I think the first place, and it took me a while as I started, through my first jobs wandering around the world, is firstly forget what you believe is the right way and actually take time to pause, look, listen, and learn what's happening where you land. I've been very blessed to work in Japan, China, India, North America, Canada, Europe. Fundamentally different languages, but economies, cultures, histories, backgrounds, all of them fascinating for very, very different and sometimes similar reasons. And I think that the secret for me has been almost a sit down, shut up, listen and learn. The old, I'm not sure if it's still taught or used, but back in the day, the first 100 days of joining a business, 30 days of listening, 30 days of asking questions and verifying, And then the last 30 to 40 days, decisions change what you want to do with what you've heard and listened. I think when you go to a new country, oh my God, yeah, I'm not sure what the 100 days should be, but exactly the same process. Just listen and learn and absorb and be open and try to understand and ask as many questions as you can. And then it will click and you'll feel comfortable. People will, more importantly, feel comfortable with you. Then you can start to operate. I think a lot of people land and immediately say, well, this is how we've done things. Well, okay, well, we're going to be pushing the wrong way up the stream here from day one. And I think again, for folks like you and I, the greatest joy is just sitting, watching, learning and listening about the culture and the history and the people, from a personal perspective as well. So yeah, I think my advice, and it's certainly the same to my kids now, they're all grown up. If you get the opportunity to work overseas, just go do it. It's immensely enriching.
Absolutely. I've seen that 100 days or whatever, that period of watch, listen, ask, and then act, implemented by some very, very good managers who I'm growing to love and respect. And I think it's good wisdom. Even if they don't train it anymore, they should do that. Hello to Melissa and Julie. Melissa listens. Great job done where you just sit back and watch for a while before you start changing it. The academics, or people like me who like using big words, call what you were describing ethnocentricity. And that means that it is a mindset that says the way that I live is the only right way to live. So I go overseas and I see people using or driving alongside the road. And I think, well, that's just wrong. You know what I mean? Whereas you're suggesting you go there and say, just chill, just start trying to figure out why people are living differently and how it works.
Yeah, and I think just on a human, an individual level, it's respectful. Just be respectful. Don't land and say, okay, this is how it's going to be, folks. Just be respectful to the culture. You're walking into somebody else's home, essentially. Just be respectful. And then, more positively, you will learn. And your rate of learning, your rate of absorption will be far quicker if you just take that breath at the start, and if you're trying to, understand it later on when you're deep in the weeds. But I think it's easier said for folks who are maybe more extroverted, who really do want to do the travel. It can be terrifying for people to take a role overseas. It doesn't even be overseas, right? Some of the countries we work in are huge, but to go to a new place and to try and find your feet in a strange environment, it can be paralyzing and terrifying. And I think, again, that's where the organizational culture to bring people from place A to place B, to put them in an environment where they can afford to take a breath and learn and listen and create relationships and understand people and allow people to understand them. It's very easy to be impatient, especially at a leadership level.
Time.
That clock ticks quickly, right? And you feel if you're not making decisions by day 3, you're almost failing the role you've just been applied into. But actually, I think you get more quality of just learning, listening to people, especially the people that are there before you. They will tell you what works, what doesn't work, what has been tried in the past and why it's failed. So that when you do step in, you step in with confidence, you step in with support, you step in as a team into whatever actions you want to take.
Every culture's got a different pace. Every organisation, by the way, has got a different pace, and you just got to get into that rhythm to try and understand how best to influence. And I know what you mean about terrifying, different, strange places. I've been to Melbourne, and it's just different. That's going to get me into trouble, isn't it?
You and I both know. Thank you.
Let's briefly talk about the digital question. You set up that new section or that new business being fully digitalized. Did you was it a digital solution, or did you start out with saying, okay, here's the value? We use technology as the value and base and find solutions, or did it start with being, here's what we're going to do, and now let's go and find a digital solution? Pretty bad question, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to ask.
No, absolutely. It was, again, the joy we had of building a division out of an existing business is we had, obviously internally, existing technology to do all the procurement and supply chain stuff. So very blessed, because not every business has, and the constant frustration of lots of procurement and supply chain people is a lack of technology investment in their organizations, especially smaller businesses. So we were very blessed with that. What we had to do was sit down and say, what's the user experience from a client perspective? So, our clients are, as I said before, everybody from the chefs, the hospitality workers, the guys and girls on the loading docks, the right up to the CFO, the COO, the accountants. How does our platform create the quickest, easiest, repeatable, seamless user experience for them? Because all of those folks have very limited time, especially in hospitality. Chefs and service professionals in hospitality have no time at all. And anytime you take folks away from the customer to a computer terminal to do something, you are diluting their ability to form relationships, to please their customer, to deliver great customer service, impacts their business. So the bit we had to sit back and say is, okay, which of our technologies touch in some way directly or indirectly the customer experience? How good is that customer experience? Does it live up to those principles of being a pleasant, easy, seamless experience? And that plus our internal technology, do they create quick workflows? Because the quicker the technology piece, the more time it frees up to spend with people. And in a service industry, as we were in food and hospitality, or as they are, and I've just left, customer service is everything. Time with the customer is everything. Speed of delivering service to the customer, quality of delivering, consistency in delivering, especially in food, when you think about food safety and everything else. None of that is helped when you take people away from the front counter, from the kitchen, from their environment to a computer terminal. So that speed of execution and that simplicity of execution was really the bit we had to sit down and say, okay, where are we not good enough and where do we need to invest?
How did you pressure test the user experience?
We used our own folks. So we looked at the technology we used to support and service our own organization, and said, okay, well, let's start there. Can we refine what we already have based on what they tell us works for them and doesn't work for them? I think you get a lot more forgiveness internally inside your own organization than you do external third-party clients who don't know you and have never worked with you before. So a lot of honest conversations internally to say, okay, what works, what doesn't work, and that created two road paths, if you like. It created a road path of saying, what additional technologies do we need for this different type of external customer? And it also said, okay, now we've uncovered a path of stuff, of investments and innovations or system changes or whatever it may be that improves the experience for our internal folks as well. So doubly valuable, but I think it's very rare, and I certainly feel very, very blessed to be able to build a business within a larger organization, to be able to pressure test it with your own folks and to say, okay, tell me what works, and then to be able to take that outside and say to folks, okay, here's what we've got. Tell me what you think about it. That's a really fun experience. We learned a lot from that. We learned a lot of the stuff we thought was working wasn't. A lot of the stuff we thought was efficient wasn't. And a lot of our folks were putting up with the user experience because that's what the experience we gave them, not the experience that we should be giving them. And the path of just simple changes, not massive investments in technology advances, but simple changes in workflow and process, and even down to self-service password logins and things like this. They make huge impact to the end customer internally and externally in their ability to do their job well.
Did you have some way of measuring that? Like specifically measuring it?
Yeah, look, we had a bunch of stats attached to the technology so that we could see a process. We can see volume of transactions, pace of transactions, compliance, all that type of stuff. who was using the preferred products versus the non-preferred products. What does the DIFOT, the delivery in full and on time, look like? All of those kind of really good operational core service metrics. We were blessed to have an internal team run by some very talented folks as an internal call center to all of our customers, internally and externally. And many call centers are kind of ticket environments where no matter how the question came to us, whether it was a complaint, a concern, an emergency requirement, whatever it was, we'd capture all of that and we'd monitor and look at it and say, okay, what types of issues, of what frequency, and what geographies, in which products, in which clients, in which sectors, in which environments. And that really drives you deep down into the, what do we fix first and what's going to have the most impact. And then the rest, the kind of formulaic surveys, but there is no substitute for getting out and walking the floors of the business, of the customer. We had folks, go and serve. We had people who would come from the service part of our business into our team and bring all of that knowledge with them and that knowledge sharing and say, well, actually, guys, this is how it feels out on the front line, if you like. So very blessed to have multiple forms there, but there is no substitute from going and walking the floors and delivering the service and being with the folks and seeing how they do what they do.
It's really good insight, isn't it? If you give 10 people an action to take, they'll do it 10 different ways. There's no, and when you're designing technology and end user and whatever, it needs to have fundamental effect that people come up with it differently. I remember that thing about being back at school or something other than saying, everyone do, a 3-minute video on the state of our high school or something like that. And you'd end up with wildly different solutions. Everyone would see it differently. And it was real insight for me from early on to understand that no two people see things the same way, even if you give them the exact same task. Great insights. Been a good chat. I really enjoyed it. I've decided, by the way, Andy, that we won't come up with a new version of Y2K to make a lot of money. We'll give that one a miss. I think I'm absolutely horrified to hear that you're not good at Instagram and TikTok, and I think we should get together and try and get you 1 million followers on Instagram or TikTok or something like that. What do you think?
I'm pretty sure I won't get 4 followers in my own house, James. But God bless your ambition.
We've got to have a plan. You've got to have goals. Thank you, my friend. All the best with whichever way life takes you. I hope the next part of the journey is as much fun as the past one.
I'm sure it will be. Again, it won't be better, it won't be worse. It'll just be different, and I can't wait to find out what it's going to be. But thank you for having me back on the podcast. It's always good to talk to you. I'll look forward to the next ones to come as well.
Catch you soon. It's your shout for the coffee, I think.
Done. Thanks, James.
Well, that's it for another episode of Supply Circles. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thanks for your feedback. If you do have any feedback on today's interview with Andy Brightmore or ideas for the show, or just want to give me some feedback, just hit me up at james.scotland@aigroup.com.au or head over to my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back in a fortnight with more business improvement insights into the keys to building sustainable supply chains. Thanks for joining me. This is Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland. Bye for now.